I would never worship a god that would send someone to an eternal lake of fire to be burned forever for the simple fact of non-belief.
Satan or the serpent wanted to give humans that knowledge. I believe that's a good action.
That is a good action.
That's a good action. That's justifiable.
The first person to advocate for equal rights.
Yes.
Ain't no way they said advocate for human rights, bro. Jubilee came out with a banger with this one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sure you guys read the title. This video is about 3 Satanists, 1 Hindu girl and 1 Muslim, and then 1 Christian coming together, and they get asked various questions about just religion in general, about hell, good and evil, being a good person. And I feel like up to this point, this is probably one of the most important videos that I have made, for the simple fact that the same ideas being spread in this video from the various people are basically the kind of ideals that most people in society have today, both young and old. So I feel like this is a great video. Please stay throughout the whole video, because I'm going to break down a couple of the questions that they go through, not all of them. I'll be specifically focusing on the question of what is hell, good and evil, and then being a good person. I'll give my own point of view, my own input on it. I'll talk about some verses from the Bible that we can connect to it. And yeah, I feel like this is a very important video, so please stay tuned. Let's get straight into it. So this is the first question: is hell real?
Hell is a real place.
I don't actually know, like, when I try to think of what hell looks like to me, I don't think it's how it's been in movies or people just talk about like some fiery inferno. I believe in an afterlife where there is a kind of a good place and a bad place, where what you do here kind of determines where you're going to end up.
Yeah, one of the signs that there is something greater than us out there is that we see something beautiful that we want someone to express our thanksgiving to and our worship towards. And in the same way, on the opposite end of the spectrum, when there are terrible deeds or acts that are committed by humans towards one another, that there also needs to be a place of justice. And so I believe that there is a heaven and that there is a hell, and that the gift of grace that God offers us is so generous that for those who reject it, that there has to be a place of judgment. So yeah.
Can I get my disagreeers to come in?
It's interesting after this point.
Personally, I would never worship a god that would send someone to an eternal lake of fire to be burned forever for the simple fact of non-belief, when that deity knows what it would take to convince every single person on this planet. That is cruel, it is inhumane, it is not kind, it is not generous, and that is not a God worthy of worship.
What's more, it would be damning the vast majority of everyone who's ever existed for not believing in him for a set of rules that he created.
To be fair, I feel like this presupposes that to burn in hell means that you don't believe in God. I'm sure that there are religions, and I know that there are people who believe that hell is a place for murderers, you know? And when I was Jewish, we didn't believe in hell. They didn't even talk about the devil. I just kind of came upon it myself. I believe that in the event that we have spirits and they will go on to some other realm, it's probably more of a nebulous place than a physical hell, lake, fire, everything.
I don't even believe we have souls necessarily. Yeah. I'd like to see some evidence before I believe something like that.
I barely believe that we're even conscious, let alone, like, I'm about to have an existential crisis up here.
I think the historical Christian position is that the gift of the invitation that God gives to the people that he made is so generous and came at such a high price to him.
A high price, he gave up a weekend.
He
gave up a weekend.
Right.
He was God before.
Yeah.
He was God during, and he's God now. He gave up a weekend. If I knew right now that I could go off and die and then not die, where's the gift in that, number one?
I'm able to look at the grace that has been extended to me, and I receive it.
I want to make sure I can get a full set of Sean.
Okay, so the way that I would commonly think of it is that if I gave up the life of my own son in exchange for your life, that it is okay then for me to make the invitation that God makes towards us.
Is that moral?
Is it moral?
Is it moral? On a corporeal level?
Jesus took on the penalty that I deserved for the sins that I committed, if we're looking at the traditional Christian faith. And so I receive his gift of grace and as a payment for the things that I had done. So your question, is it moral or is it just? Is it fair? I'm able as a Christian to say, no, it's not fair, because I deserve the punishment that he took on himself.
So yeah, like you guys see, that was a really interesting conversation. It was a loaded question, already starting off the bat with like a hard question. One thing I do want to kind of distinguish is even in like Satanism, right? There's like two distinctions that I know is like we believe every Satanist is like a devil worshiper, like straight up like black cloak, like they're over here doing sacrifice. No, there are some in that realm, but most Satanists are like people who like we see a lot of pride in like the vast majority of Satanists who just believe that the devil was right. Like we need to give the devil a chance. He's probably like, trying to tell us the truth about God, and God is this, always talking down on God's name. And that's what I see in this video a lot. Mind you, this video is about the world religions and versus Satanists. Can they see eye to eye on various questions? But as you'll see throughout the video, it's basically everyone kind of dunking on the Christian or kind of disagreeing with the Christian, but agreeing with everybody else. And that's just a distinguishing thing about Christianity is that's one thing I want to also like really emphasize on. The difference between Christianity and other religions is one word, it's grace. That's the only thing that really differentiates. And that was the funny thing, that was the Satanist's biggest like kind of, he was trying to like make fun of it, like, oh, what did he do? He died. But that's like the biggest differentiator, that our God took the step to us first, rather than us trying to climb our way to God. Christianity's God came down and, reached into his creation to save it. And on the argument of hell, and I'll show you guys a verse that I really think that can kind of hedge this all together well. But my point of view on this question is that everyone tends to like scream or like kind of complain that we need justice in this world. Like evil has to be paid. Like we see all these protests and all these different people like just, suffering really. The world is full of evil. And all we see every day is people complaining about we need justice. And, we might not get justice in this lifetime, but we know everyone kind of has that mindset that evil has to get, paid for. When you see someone do something so terrible, you're like, no way that person is going to just escape. Like, that's just crazy. And we all have that innate, thinking that, nah, that person's not going to escape. But where it gets a little bit of our ego and our pride, and what I see in this video, mind you, by the way, these Satanists, that especially that guy Richard, who was really passionate in the beginning, talking about like, I cannot serve a God who, we see this a lot between atheists and like people who don't believe or kind of hate God. It's not that they have lack of evidence, it's that their heart posture is like they're so hardened that they hate God for whatever reason. I don't know what happens in their personal life. I don't know their background, but I'm pretty sure most of them probably came from families or communities where that didn't represent God or Jesus good. And then they just labeled that as, they just took that as God, and they blamed God for that. And they just have hatred for him. But anyways, back on the first thing is, we all want justice. And then we're all happy that, when the evil people get what they deserve, even in the end when God judges, we expect the murderer to be in hell. We expect Hitler to be in hell. The most terrible people you could think of, you're like, man, they are going to hell. Ain't no way they're going to survive this and make it to anywhere that's peaceful. But where it comes down to is when that accountability and that standard is shifted from, yeah, they're going to get what they deserve if they're not right with God. But what about you? Have you lied? Have you suppressed the truth? Have you had anger in your heart? Have you did all these evil things that are not, not that big to you, but in the eyes of a perfect judge? You can't even get away with that in a regular court. Imagine the heavenly court where God's standard is holy. And I feel like that's the biggest thing where the Satanists are not really like recognizing it. Just generally anyone in this video besides the Christian, is that the standard is different. And I feel like it's our ego and our pride to kind of make God do his own, like make him conform to our standards. Like, nah, like that's too much. Like, how could we go to hell for that? And how could, how can someone not believe in you, but still suffer the price of not wanting to be with you? How does that make sense? And that's the verse that I really feel like is going to tie everything together. And it's found in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 7 through 10, and it says, "And to grant relief to you who are afflicted as well as to us, when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven with his mighty angels in flaming fire, inflicting vengeance on those who do not know God and on those who do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus. They will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might, when he comes on that day to be glorified in his saints and to be marveled at among all who have believed, because our testimony to you was believed." That basically wraps up the whole idea of this. That the condemnation on those who are going to hell or will be condemned to hell is not that they just did evil. It's that they hated the truth, hated the righteousness of God, and committed evil and denied Jesus. That's the condemnation being set on these people. They denied the gospel. And the atheist was trying to dunk on that, oh, he just gave us a weekend. And that weekend, he paid for the sins of mankind. God put on human flesh and took the beating, bruising, everything that you were supposed to get so that he could make a way for you to be made right. That justice everyone is crying about was made on the cross. And then you want to deny that. And then you still want to have a peace in the afterlife. You still want to not be in a place where it's terrible because you don't think what you did was that bad. I think it's like a mindset thing where we are trying to pass the judgment in our standard. We're looking at it like, okay, it wasn't that bad. I just didn't want to believe in God. Why do I have to suffer this punishment? But when you look at it from God's point of view, that not only have you committed this grave sin of, because God's standard is wholly 100% perfection. You do not meet that standard already. And then not only did he send his son to die for you and live a life that you should have lived, but you couldn't. And he made a way for you. And then you deny that. And then you still want to have the benefits of God. Also, hell is basically a place where God's presence isn't. So how can you say you hate God and you deny him, but then want to be with an eternity with him? It doesn't make sense. So that's what I feel like with this question, especially, even though it was loaded, I feel like that was my response to it. This next question is about good and evil and if Satan is evil or not.
I believe in good and evil.
I haven't, as part of my own belief system for sure, a conviction that all of our hearts can at sometimes lead us to do acts of evil, and so I see it in the world around me on both sides.
Yeah, I think the phrasing is something that's it's a little bit catchy.
It's this dichotomy.
Yeah,
it just
I mean, I believe in right and wrong, and I think some things, for me, a lot of things lie in the gray area, but there are some things that I consider right and wrong, but I wouldn't say it's the same as good and evil, right?
That was beautifully said. That was...
Thank you.
But yeah, no, I agree with that. But I also believe that what is right and wrong has changed throughout history. And it's something where I don't know if everyday actions that I do right now are going to be considered evil later on. Like, is driving a car going to be considered wrong?
I don't believe in an evil entity who is, pitchfork and horns and looking like me with a goatee. That doesn't actually happen. If you ask anybody throughout history, they're always the hero of their own novel.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Satan is evil.
None of them.
Wait, why did you stop?
I was trying to play it out in my head, but then I realized I don't agree with that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, the fact that there is a Satan who is real and the fact that he is evil is, it's an important, pretty central belief that we hold in the Christian faith, and that there is a good and loving God and a Satan who is evil.
So let's go back to Genesis, okay? God wanted to keep humans from eating the fruit of knowledge, correct? And Satan, or the serpent, wanted to give humans that knowledge. I believe that's a good action.
That is a good action.
That's a good action. That's justifiable.
the first person to advocate for equal rights.
Yes.
That part kills me. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sorry I stopped it, but that part kills me every time. Equal, right?
We only heard God's perspective, and from my perspective, I mean, just looking into the Bible, it's like we didn't hear Satan's perspective. Maybe he said, God is a tyrannical God, and I'm going to rebel from him, and I'm going to become a fallen angel to help mankind.
My interpretation and understanding of that story is that God created an environment where and it was an environment of love and peace, and where his children that he created and who he loved, who he created in his image would.
They were naked and they didn't have understanding.
Yeah, and that this was an environment for them to.
So,
Wait, we gotta hear his whole point.
To flourish, and so he puts them in this environment, and he desires for them to flourish and to live in unashamed relationship with him and his perfection and his glory
naked
and
stupid.
I see God making simple playthings because he's bored, if it's real then, and then saying, don't do this because I don't want you on my level. And if you do, I have to make sure you can't live forever so you really don't get on my level.
Would you think that if you heard that one of your friends was having a baby and you'd say, oh, you're just making a plaything for your...
That's
Depending
different.
on their
That's
intention
different.
of having the baby,
but
There are
possibly,
some
yeah.
parents who use their kids as their plaything.
So yeah, those were the kind of, it's like a question 1, question A, B, how it started off with good and evil, and then it kind of pivoted into saying evil or not. I hope you guys starting to see the kind of the gist of the crowd here. Besides the Christian, especially in the Satanists, you see a lot of pride and ego. That how it started off with the first question is like good and evil, and then everyone was saying, like, besides the Christian, they were all saying, like, again, that ego of like, I don't want to call what I'm doing evil, or like I don't want to call it good and evil. Like, no one wants to be accountable to what they're doing, you know? Nobody wants to look within themselves and say, there's nothing good in there. Even when I'm doing good, I have a motive, or I have a hidden motive, or I have a hidden agenda, or no one wants to be labeled as what they really are. It's dark in there for everyone. We are all a mess. And it was so interesting to see them trying to like find a way, like, I wouldn't call it evil. I would just call it, like, you know, right and wrong. Sometimes we do wrong, sometimes we do right. But then again, we always have to go back to that, the question of by whose standard are we talking about? Because even what the girl said, you know, what I'm doing wrong now was not always wrong, or what I'm doing right was not always seen right or wrong. That just kind of plays into the narrative of like, if we don't have a standard, you are 100% correct. If we don't have a standard, I could just feel like killing people, and you could feel like not killing people. It's okay to my standard. But there has to be a standard above all of us, or else there's no truth. Is just subjective. We could just be whatever we want to be, do whatever we want to do, and we can't blame somebody for acting out their truth, or acting out their, you know, feelings or their convictions, because that's up to them. But when it comes to the standard that God has, which is perfection and holiness and justice, then whenever we try to like look at that, we do not want to be accountable. And that's the biggest thing I'm starting to see in this video, is they don't want accountability. People don't want to serve a God that's going to keep them accountable, or a God that's going to call them out on their hypocrisy and their sin. And this whole notion about Satan not being evil, I find it so fascinating, because we see this a lot in a lot of, you know, Satanists and people who just kind of reject God and like label him as like this tyrannical figure. And we could just read the verse there that she was talking about. It's in Genesis 3, and I'll just highlighted it already. It says, did God, and this is the serpent responding to Eve when he was trying to tempt her to eat of the apple. And he was like, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. But the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So that's the biggest thing right there. We see people want to be like God. The devil wanted to be like God. The devil wanted to be God. He wanted to be worshipped as God. He hated God. He was prideful in his heart. And we see that people who kind of follow his teachings have the same mindset of like, they don't trust God. They believe God is evil. They believe God is withholding something from them. Even though in this garden, by the way, that they want to say that Adam and Eve were naked and afraid and naked and dumb, was a majestic garden. God gave him everything. He gave him all the plants. He didn't withhold anything from them. But in this tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, is not evil itself, but that simple act of disobeying God was what caused the fall. When they replaced God's commands with the command of an enemy, or they disregarded his commands and disobeyed him, that's when the fall happened, and they were cursed, as we see. So it's so interesting. Even now and today, we see this same principle being played out every day. You know, the voice that goes into your head, the enemy tempting us to say, did God actually say do this? And it's within our nature to be like, now, obviously after the fall, in our nature, our wicked fall nature, to always, you know, find a way out of accountability. You know, like, I could commit this sin. Like, it's not that serious. Like, I think God's being a little too uptight. It's not that serious. Because we know we don't look at it in the point of view of an almighty God who sees everything, who sees all the outcomes. We look at it in our point of view, our selfish, egotistical, just disgusting hearts, that we think that we're just better than God. And it reminds me of that Job moment when Job was questioning God, even though rightfully so his life was a mess. But then God humbled him. He was like, where were you when I did this? Where were you when I created all these things? And then what did Job say? He said, my bad. I should have never opened my mouth. Who am I? That is the difference between the believer and the unbeliever. It's this humility of understanding. Who am I trying to question God about his creation? Who am I looking back to the creator? Imagine if you created like an invention, like a computer, like a different type of computer, and your computer's over here complaining about, like, why did you do this? Why did you do this? How would you feel? Like, you'd be like, you are my creation. And that's of us being evil. Imagine a holy God. Who are we to question his motives and his reasonings? And then when people do that, they find themselves in this dangerous place of wanting to be their own God, wanting to be their own authority, which at the end, we see how that ends up. So I find this really fascinating. But the last question especially kind of ties it all in for me. And it's the last question of, do you think you're a good person? That kind of basically summarizes everything I've been saying. And I want you guys to see this because it's interesting.
I consider myself a good person.
They all running up there now, huh?
I'm a great person.
I really think good and bad is objective because does everyone love me? No. There are people who absolutely wish me dead, and that's okay. Maybe I deserve it from them. I don't know. But on the other hand, you know, I help little old ladies across the street, and I give to the poor, and I give time and energy, and so is that good? Maybe it outweighs the bad.
It's that constantly striving to be better in whatever means that is, but in a moving forward sense, not just staying stagnant and I'm this and I'm going to stay this way all the time.
Yeah, it's an active pursuit. Like you have to do it every single day.
Completely.
No, I do believe that being good is in these minute, like little actions, these micro actions that you do every single day.
I'm intrigued. Do you guys base it more on your intentions or more on your actions?
I think it's both, but intention is really important.
Yes.
It is. Because sometimes you do something thinking that it's going to be a good thing, but it turns out to be disastrous. But as long as you had a good intention in it, I feel like it's
Like
not,
to a certain extent.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
How many people do good things because they think that's what people expect good things to be?
Yeah, and for me, I would just hope that my faith would be borne out in acts of kindness and mercy and compassion and charity. And I know that doesn't necessarily come from me, but I believe that I'm a good person because of who God has made me to be. Yeah.
I think you're a good person because you're a good person. I also think you're more moral than the God of the Bible. I think you're a genuinely good person, and I think you're better than the Bible.
I think there's good in everybody. Maybe sometimes it's deep within, but but I do think that at their core, everybody's a good person.
Right there, that's basically, if you can't see the gist of what's going on here, that kind of summarizes it. Up to this point, barely anybody was coming up to sit down when they were talking about good, evil. They didn't want to label it good and evil. They're like, that's a bit harsh. But when the question turns to them of like, do you think you're a good person? Everybody wants to go sit up there. And even with the Christian, I didn't agree with him sitting up there. Like, I personally wouldn't have done it, but I kind of see his point of view, so it's fine. Like, it's okay. But this pride and ego thing I've been talking about this entire video, that up to this point, people, they didn't want to receive accountability for what they're doing. They didn't want to, call what their deeds are doing, evil. Because in your own heart, you don't want to be looked at as, I'm bad, but I might do a bad thing, but I'm not a bad person. They don't want to identify themselves with their actions. Their actions show their heart. And even the deep actions that they don't even want to talk about, that they might not be revealing, shows your heart. And it's funny how I think his name is Richard, one of the atheists with the mustache, he was talking about, I help old ladies walk across the street. I give money to the poor. And it reminded me of this verse, and it's found in Isaiah 64, verse 6. And it says, all of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous acts are like filthy rags. We all shrivel up like a leaf, and like the wind, our sins sweep us away. So even the other world religions, right? Besides Christianity and the unbeliever, they all have the same mindset in the sense of they're trying to reach their way up to God. The one who believes in God tries to reach their way up to God. The one who doesn't believe think they're already good enough. They don't need God. So it's the same thing. The difference with Christianity is we know that we in ourselves, in it, like by myself, I can do nothing. I am not good. My intentions are not good. I might do good things, but most of the time I'm doing bad things already. So there's no way I can measure up. I can't tilt the scales, because in the Bible, if you commit a sin or if you could break the law, you're already condemned as a lawbreaker in general. So you break all the laws just by committing one. So how can I outweigh that? And that's the struggle that all of mankind is in. You committed a sin. You already sinned once. So you're already a sinner. So how do you not become a sinner? And how does God, commit justice with you? Where does he send you? So he comes and dies the death you should have died. And he makes the scale even. The price is paid. And now there's justice served. And you get to undeservingly spend eternity with him. And because of that, the believer has no right to boast at all. There's nothing to boast about. There's nothing to brag about. I can't look into myself like, man, I'm a good guy. Because I know all this was a gift from God. Even though the guy said it was a 3-day vacation, it was a gift from God. He didn't have to do that. He would have been just fine. But because he loves us, he did that. And I feel like if people understood it that way, they would understand that God is loving. He loves me. So why would I run from him? And we could see even in other verses. I think there's 2 other verses I put up. And the other one is Jeremiah 17, verse 9. It says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. And then in Philippians chapter 3, verse 9, and it says, and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. And that is how I can kind of summarize this video for all of you guys who are watching, even for people in this video, that let's be found by God, not thinking that we can do it on our own, but let's be found by God, relying on him, because only he can, fulfill the law, fulfill the righteousness that we need. We're not going to heaven because of us. We're going to heaven because of him. And yeah, this video was great to watch, but I really feel like this is one of my important videos because a lot of people have this mindset of they want to question God. They want to do this. They want to label God as evil because they know that in themselves they're not good. But because they can't seem to rationalize that they need to depend on God, they just label him as evil and they just cut him out, thinking they can do it on their own. But let me know what you guys think in the video about any of the questions. Give me your opinions, your reactions, your thoughts. And let me know if you guys want me to watch anything else. I'll see you guys on the next one.